Okay, so let's start. And very warm welcome to everyone who's here on the Zoom live. I suppose we're live, half alive. And then we can't call the people on YouTube dead, so I don't know what we can say. But anyway, welcome to those of you who are here live for the session. This is the first of 5 teachings on what is in Sanskrit ksanti, and it's Zerpa in Tibetan, and in English we'll be calling it forbearance. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, then good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and a very, very warm welcome. So let's start today with our excellent motivation. It's a new course, so we brighten up our minds. We try to be awake, joyful because Dharma is forever and everything else isn't. And it's for everyone and everything else isn't. So for everyone, forever is a lot, and we got it. So it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. So with a joyful mind and a very loving, caring mind for everybody and everybody, without one exception, as we saw in the last course. But then, although we care for everybody, we can naturally have a special care for those people we know, we have known, and who've been connected with us through the power of karma. It's very important that we include them 100% in our loving intentions. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds, the Sangha. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, and live in places of peace and plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering. And may they attain great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamawati shamita shatra kurimam kurimarajite karota ke yorite jovati ollo yane bishuddhane male malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana muki paramuki amuki shamme dawane sawa graha bandhanane nigritva Sava bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savitva buddhamudra anudgatita sava mare butsarita parishuddhe piga shantu sava mara kamani. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads, on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So it's very nice for me when it's the first of a series, because I feel I've got time. And then when we get to the last episode or the one before, then I feel very pressured because I've got to get all the bits in before it's over. So today I'd like to start a little bit elliptically. I don't want to pick up the text and straight away go through the 1, 2, 3, all the different things that we need to learn. That's my job here. My job is to talk. Your job is to listen. And what I'm talking is ideas. And communication, language, is the best we can do to communicate, especially over a distance like this. So you don't need to answer, but I'm sure if I asked you, what is 2 plus 2, that you'd tell me 4, I think. And especially if it was one of these, you don't have time to think about it. 2 plus 2, 4, right? 2 what? Plus 2 what? 2 apples plus 2 laws of thermodynamics makes 4 what? And even 2 apples plus 2 apples, what kind of apples? You can have big green Granny Smiths and tiny little crab apples. So if you've got 4 different ones, we can say 4 apples, but it's not 4 of the same thing. This is the trouble with abstract thought. I say words, you listen, and straight away you've put them together. 2 plus 2, 4, impermanence, voidness, and it just goes in, and you put it together. We've already moved on to the next one. And of course, it's the best we can do, but we need to think about things. We like 2 plus 2, 2 what plus 2 what, that way. And stop, think, consider. Is it? And then what's he really saying? Or if this is Buddha's teaching, if Buddha was here right now, what would Buddha want me to understand, to feel in my heart, to realize? So the intellect is okay, it's okay, but it's very limited. So my job is not just to pass on the ideas, it's to try and bring them a bit to life. But then, let's say I bring them 5% to life. Your job is to do the other 95%. You take the teaching away, you think about it, you observe life. And so it's very relevant for this course on forbearance. It's so much about life in general. It's so much about what we will be confronted with as we evolve along this famous Buddhist path. I had an interview with one of my students earlier on in the week, and I mentioned pop-up books, and the person didn't understand. So, like if I told you the story of Noah's Ark, right, from the Bible, Noah, the Ark, the flood, yeah? So there are words, he built an ark, but then if you've got a pop-up book, I don't know if you can see, then we can see the ark, and then on the storm, and then there's little tabs you can pull, and then the waves move and things like this. It makes it more, brings it more to life. And then there's a bird, there's a dove. Where's it going? Whee! You see. So it's a lovely book, this. And then in the end, there's a rainbow. So my job is to turn a flat book into a pop-up book. Your job's to go away, build an ark, and put it on the water, float it. So when we look at these teachings, they are rather systematized. We'll be looking at a ninefold set of advice from Shantideva's tradition, fivefold set of advice from the Sangha's tradition, words, a lot of ideas, but so very relevant. And so before we plunge into the traditional presentation, I'd also like to start with two stories. One's a story, excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, and just trying to find the name of something. One's a story from the Jataka stories. So these were told by the Buddha. They are part of the official Buddhist teachings, but they mainly come, as far as I know, from what was gathered together after the Buddha's passing, and they, how officially they are part of the teachings is not quite sure. But anyway, they're stories mainly of the Buddha's former lives as a bodhisattva. And because he is said to have spent 3 cosmic eons, which is millions and millions and millions of years, more than that, on a very gradual, slow path to enlightenment, very thorough, and very safe. Little steps forward, and very thorough, meticulous clean-up job, and all the rest. So anyway, he had many former lives, and then in particular, when he was talking about himself and his main disciples, then he told sometimes, this happened, and in that life you were this person. So this is a story from a Buddha's former life when he was somebody called Kantaka. And so born in, well, it's described as India, but there's more than India in our world. In the Buddhist stories, there are kind of Indias and Himalayas and Bodh Gayas in past ages as well of civilization. So this isn't in Indian recent history, it's probably in another world, in time-space. But anyway, born into a very rich family, and then his parents died, and he saw that even no matter how rich you are, you're going to die, and he wanted to renounce the world. So he shared his considerable wealth with good people so they could use it well. And then he went to meditate in the mountains. And he lived wild in the forests, mainly on berries and fruits. And after lots of years, at one point, he decided to go to the equivalent of Benares, or what's it called these days, Varanasi, or Kashi, the old name, and to get some long-term supplies like salt. And so he went there, and he went on a begging round, and he stopped by the door of one person who was the king's general, the king's general was a good man, and he really liked the look of this monk, yogi, and he felt a lot of nobility in his presence. And so he said, you can come here every day and I'll feed you. And so then the Kantaka, he went to the Royal Park, very nice place, and sat down to meditate. A bit later on, the king came to the park, very drunk, and with his harem. He was a king with lots of ladies to please him, some of them very good singers, some of them musicians, some of them dancers. So all of these turn up in the very nice park, and then the king's really enjoying it, and he finds his favorite lady, and he's quite drunk and he's very tired. So he puts his head on her lap and he falls asleep. So when he's deep asleep, snoring like this, the ladies who are dancing and playing music said, no point, he's far gone. And so they decide to go and pick fruit, because there's lots of fruit trees in the park, very nice place. And then they see Kantaka sitting there looking so good. And they go and sit with him and they ask for teachings. And so then they're listening. Then at one point the king wakes up, he says, where's everyone gone? Probably, where's everybody gone? Like this. And then he's upset that they've left him. And he gets his sword and he goes looking for them. And he finds them sitting with this yogi. And the general, the one who fed the yogi, he's with him too. And the king's very upset that they left, and they look so enchanted with this man. First of all, he wants to attack the yogi. General hold him back, and they said, at least talk with him, see why they're so fascinated. And he asked him, and he said, what are you telling them about? And he said, forbearance. He said, oh yeah. He said, well, and what is that? And it says, my mind stays peaceful no matter what happens. And the king said, we'll see about that. So he gets his executioner and he gets him to take thorns off some of the bushes and to beat Kantaka very, very many times. So he's covered in blood, but he still remains very calm, very peaceful. And then he tells the king, he said, I'll always remain peaceful. It's in my heart. The king says, we'll see. So then he has his feet and hands cut off. Still he remains peaceful. And then he says something again to the king about how if the mind is truly calm, it doesn't matter even if you die. He would never be angry at the king. And the king says, we'll see. And he cuts off his ears and his nose. And of course, he's in a very, very terrible state now. And he still says, with what breath he's got left, he says, I will never resent you. I'll always feel nothing but loving care for you in my heart. So then the king kicks him in the heart and tells all the ladies, come on, we're going, and leaves him there to die. The general, who's very, very upset by all of this, tries to treat the wounds of Kantaka, but he's bled too much, and so he dies. The king, on the way back to the palace, drops dead, and in the story, he goes straight away down to the hell realms. In his mind, it's as though the earth opens up, and no bardo, straight to a terrible rebirth. So when the Buddha told this story, he said to Shariputra, one of his main disciples, in that life, you were the general. And my cousin, Devadatta, was the drunken king. So there we get a story of great forbearance. It's another story from much more recent times, from Patrul Rinpoche. Patrul Rinpoche was a very, very great master of the Nyingma and Kagyu traditions, very great Dzogchen master. but he mainly wandered. He didn't want a home. He often lived in a tent or sometimes just in a hollow in the ground, and sometimes he wandered alone. Now, this story, there are several versions, and with stories, storytellers have kind of got a license to jazz up the story a little bit, so I'm going to jazz up the story so the point is made. So he's coming to one area, and there's somebody who's famous as a Buddhist meditator. In some versions of the story, he's a geshe. He was a geshe in a monastery who's gone up for 6 years to meditate 1 year on each of the paramita, 6 paramitas. In other versions, he's somebody who's been there 20 years. So anyway, Patrul Rinpoche feels, how can you say, drawn to go and visit him. I think many of you have heard this story before. It's a very famous one. And so he's in retreat in a very remote place. So it's either a cave with a kind of wall bricked up front or wooden frame over the front, or it could be a hut, tiny hut in the mountains. So Patrul Rinpoche just bursts in, says hello, and I said, "Oh, what? I'm in retreat. Yeah, I know. Yeah, never mind all that." He said, "But where do you come from?" Patrul says, "From behind there." "Yeah, but where are you going?" "That way, forward." "And where were you born? Who are you?" "I was born on earth." And he gives him answers like this. And he says, What's your name?" And he says, "Thoughtless action." And this guy's getting it. He said, "Look, I'm in retreat. You're not supposed to come in here, right? Please, just leave." And Patrul said, "Oh, you're in retreat. Been here long?" "Yeah, 20 years I've been practicing here." 20 years? Oh, cushy number, isn't it? They feed you well. They bring up nice offerings, and between you and me, sleep a lot, right? And sleep, eat, easy life. You don't have to work. And I said, no, I'm meditating. I spend all my day meditating. And Patrul and keeps goading him. And in the end, the meditator, the retreater, gets up and forcibly is trying to push Patrul Rinpoche out the door, saying, "Get out, please, leave me, I'm in retreat." And then Patrul Rinpoche turns and says, "What are you meditating on?" He says, forbearance. Forbearance. So then he realizes, and of course Patrul Rinpoche can help him. So the first story, Kantaka, somebody who had forbearance. Second story, that meditator who hadn't yet quite got forbearance. So I just thought I'd start a bit loosely like this so that we get into the topic. And I sent a support document, and at the beginning, I think I'll read from it because it says a lot in a small space. And so start with, we can consider forbearance from 2 angles. One, first, in terms of the objective we are aiming towards, which is a state of mind that can cope with anything. The word in there, cope, is very important. Can handle anything, can cope with anything. Our paramita of forbearance is that. That's what we're working towards. Everything else is fuel towards that end. Second way we look at it is in terms of what we are working with. Now, here, the texts usually say, or the translations of texts these days say, we are working with anger. Okay, but it's very hard to find one word that covers what we are working with here. Anger is very precise. I don't know how many are we here, 46 people it says. Are any of you angry just now? Probably not. But what we're working with, I think 46 of us have it, right? So it's not anger, unless somebody's angry with me just now for saying that. But what we have to work with covers everything that disturbs the mind. Akon Rinpoche's English was quite approximative sometimes, but he invented some amazing words without knowing it. He invented one word which was distrubble, because he never learned disturb properly, and he knew it meant trouble. So that distrubbles our mind. Now, trouble is a good word for here, because in English we say troubled water, and water is very often used by the Buddha for a calm mind, peaceful mind. It's like very still water. The quality of still water is not just that it is still, but when it's still, it reflects the heavens very clearly. And you can see through it, you can see the weeds, the fishes, the stones at the bottom of the water. It's clear. So a mind which is calm, which is clear, is one thing. But once it gets troubled, then what do you see? The trouble, the little waves, movements. You don't see the sky clearly. You can't see inside the water clearly. You see the trouble. So our mind can be calm, clear, so many qualities, or it can be troubled. At the beginning, big troubles. Desire, jealousy, anger, stupidity, your mind's just thick, dull, and so on. Big troubles. And then finer and finer troubles. And then when we start to do shamatha, the trouble of distraction, even though the mind isn't angry or full of desire, it can't stay in one place. And then as we start to develop realization of shunyata, of interdependence, of blessing the presence of Tara, Guru Rinpoche, and so on, then we can't just tune into those and be there all the time. So what takes us away from the expansive, open, receptive mode is also trouble. All of this is the raw material, the working material. So it says, under this general umbrella, we have getting upset, of course, anger, being frustrated. That can be long-term, it can be for many years, it can be for many decades, when we simply don't have what we think we might have, or that we deserve. What's out there somewhere, but it didn't quite happen yet. Oh, that's a pity. There was something in my vague easing into these formal teachings. I had another thing I wanted to share. Ah, dear. Something not at all from the Buddha's teaching, but it's connected. Never mind. Okay. When we get jealous, we're working with jealousy. When we get downhearted, when we get discouraged, when we get bored, resentful, frightened, overpowered by doubt and confusion, all of those things which we call obstacles to our path or trouble. So it says here, this Paramita is famous for being a difficult one to perfect because the propensity to become upset, another word, troubled, upset, can remain dormant for years or lifetimes until it is triggered, sometimes by something quite unexpected. So this takes us to Patrul Rinpoche's story. The basic flaw of going into a safe, secluded space to meditate on forbearance. Okay, there might be some things, you might be a bit bored, maybe there are fleas in the cave, or lice, or maybe the cold, things to put up with, but you're never going to perfect your forbearance while you're not exposed to your karmic triggers, which present themselves in terms of other people, life circumstances, politics, wars, climate, all sorts of things that can make us not at peace with what's going on, not at peace with ourselves. Dhamma is the path of peace. Buddha is the peaceful one. Buddha attained perfect peace, which is not like a giant cosmic sleeping tablet, sort of, bye-bye, world, I'm at peace, gone into some state of peace. It means, as this said in our first view, a state of mind that can cope with anything. So like Kantaka, even someone is chopping you to bits. Or even with my own teacher, Akon Rinpoche, someone is stabbing you again and again until you're dead. A pure mind, a loving, kind, caring mind. So, and he used to say, Akon Rinpoche, he said, out there, and especially this was in the 70s, we were back in the atom bomb scare days, and he'd say, out there's the atom bomb. Inside you, anger is the atom bomb. Why? And then this is we'll come to it in the formal teachings. It says, anger, a moment of anger, a moment of can destroy lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of virtue. So with the first two paramita, with generosity and forbearance, we can see you can build up a lot of goodness. But the good karma would people build up normally, not if we apply the skillful methods of Mahayana, of dedication and so on, but normally the good people, the good karma people have acquired, even over many, many lifetimes, can be destroyed by one powerful moment of upsetness. Everything under this umbrella of anger. Through being upset, people throw away their Dharma practice. They turn away from their teachers, turn away from the Dharma, because it's upset them, getting upset. So that's like an atom bomb. A whole city that's evolved over centuries. Everyone's life, their home, everything that's been developed. In one moment of explosion, everything's gone. Everything. So anger is said to be everything that's under that umbrella. Doesn't mean you necessarily need to be angry, big upset. All that list of things I just said, any one of them very dramatically powerful. is the worst of the poisons, and forbearance is the most excellent of the paramita. And unlike the first two, you can't practice it all the time. You can't. You can be generous all the time. If you decided tomorrow I'm going to be generous all day long, you could find something to do. You could give your time to be a friend for somebody who's lonely. You could go and sell a few things that you've got and give the money away. If you wanted to be generous tomorrow, you could do it. If you wanted to practice right conduct, the three types of what we saw, not harming, practicing virtue, helping others, you could dedicate tomorrow to a day of really right virtue. People do. They take the 8 precepts or 10 precepts for 24 hours, and they're very, very careful with what they do. So you can do that all the time. Forbearance means not getting upset with things that normally or previously would upset you. So unless you sort of go out and pick fights with people, which isn't what forbearance is about, you can only practice it when something comes along and triggers it in your life, whatever it may be. Another person, illness, your own meditation practice, whatever it is. It's only when the trigger's there and you start seeing the process of getting upset, swinging in, getting disturbed, that we can apply the teachings of forbearance. Now, if you're a good Buddhist, and if you've been a good Buddhist for a few lives, and you've got nice karma, then you might have a very nice life and friendly circumstances and nobody to upset you. So when forbearance, when anger comes along, when something difficult comes along, for us it's very welcome. At last, an opportunity to test our forbearance. When it's taken to the limit, a possibility of improving our forbearance. So this is basically what we are looking at. Oops. Good. I had to resurrect an old iPad. I didn't want to print out 28 pages of the support documents. So, oops, can't see it, it's too bright for the screen. So it's whatever upsets the mind. Forbearance means not getting upset, not getting disturbed. One characteristic trigger of anger, remember we use the word anger here very, very globally, is to see fault in other. You'll see this one on social media quite a lot. There's a quote from Naropa. It says, samsara is seeing fault in, that's usually translated as others, which means other people. Take away the S. Other. It can be people, it can be circumstances. It's duality. So whatever's not you makes you feel uncomfortable, upset, disturbed, troubled, all those things. So some things, it says seeing fault. Fault means wrong. Wrong means not right. Right means how I'd like it to be, right? I'd like you to be like this. You're not like that. I don't like it. Oh, I wish you were like that. I wish life was like this. I wish he hadn't invaded Ukraine. Whatever it is, other feels wrong. So while we're looking at this generally, I thought in this comes from the study course module, before we go into the Buddha's teachings, especially as presented by Shantideva and others, I thought it'd be good to preempt some of the problems people have with these teachings, so that as we go through the course, you're warned and you can think about it. So, first of all, justified anger. My anger is justified. It's right. It ought to be. If I may be so bold, and maybe it might make you angry, in which case you'll have raw material to work on. It's one of the most stupid things I've ever heard. And if you believe in justified anger, you're bloody stupid. Justified means logical, reasonable. If something's wrong out there, and forget what does wrong mean, wrong in our term, just generally wrong. Society says that's very wrong. Why should the fact that something is wrong justify you losing your mind becoming unstable, your mind becoming upset? Where's the connection? Where's the logic? That's wrong, so I'm going to go mad. The more wrong it is, the madder I'm going to go. Think about it more in a pop-up book. Think about it. And I tell you what, because these are delicate topics, the thing I wanted to bring in at the beginning, in the informal beginning, if I can find it, I'd like to share it with you. It's from a novel. It's from a novel by Hermann Hesse called Narcissus and Goldmund. And it's one of my favorite books, mainly because I didn't read any novels from the age of about 22 until now. And if I have, it's one or two. I didn't read any fiction. My whole life since I went to Samaling has been study books, information. And so I read this one before then, and it's a book that struck me. And here's a few words from the book, where someone who's been in a monastery as a novice monk, a teenager still, still young, but studying Latin, Greek, all the Christian things you study in a monastic school. And he's just about to run away. And he's out in the countryside and sitting on a warm summer's day, and he finds a snail shell, the shell, empty shell that once upon a time was the home of a snail. He picked up the empty snail shell. It made a faint tinkling sound among the stones, and it was warm with sun. Absorbed, he examined the windings of the shell, the notched spiral, the capricious dwindling of its little crown, the empty gullet with its shimmer of mother of pearl. Then he closed his eyes and he felt the shape with probing fingers, which was a habit and a game with him. he turned the shell between loose fingers, slidingly retracing its contours, caressingly, without pressure, delighted with the miracle of form, the enchantment of the tangible. One of the disadvantages of school and learning, he thought dreamily, was that the mind seemed to have the tendency to see and represent all things as though they were flat and had only 2 dimensions. And this contrast with the real and the tangible somehow seemed to render all matters of the intellect shallow and worthless. Well, of course, this is Hermann Hesse, it's not the Buddha, but I love that little passage where the mystery, the exploration of the reality of that little snail shell is so, on a hot summer's day, is so different with the studying of ideas inside the walls of the monastery. I wanted to add that to what we had at the beginning. And so justified anger, please think about it and think about it again. And there can never be a justification for anger. That somebody did something wrong can be a justification for caring, for compassion. It doesn't. People say, if I don't get angry, if I don't feel upset about something, I'm not going to do something about it. Sometimes, oh, this is terrible, I must do something about this. Then you get really worked up, you get energized. So all of our wonderful teachings from Lord Buddha show us how we can care for others, and that the best way we can be of use to others is if our mind is calm and clear, because then we see the situation clearly. If you are angry, you will never see the situation clearly. You won't have taken the time to think, you'll be upset, you'll probably have a biased point of view. If we want to help, because the situation is harmful, dangerous, very unjust, whatever, out there, then the best thing we can do is wake up our mind with all of its fine, noble qualities, letting our mind become disturbed, letting our mind disturb our body so that our chakras, our energies are sending all the wrong chemicals into us and so on. Honestly, can anyone justify that? So justified anger is absolutely, totally stupid. So, and some people think if people didn't get upset, they wouldn't do something. Well, that's very primitive. Certainly not what we want to do. Other people say, yes, but if you suppress your anger, it will make you unhealthy. You'll get cancer eventually. And so then what we'll see over this course is that in general and in the long term, the Buddha's teachings are not about suppressing anger. They're about transforming and dealing with anger. But sometimes they are to do with suppressing anger, because we suppress anger if we're in danger of hurting somebody else. So I remember a very lovely person, she's dead now, long-time person at Sanneling. And she used to get very upset about things sometimes. And she didn't want to be upset. And so she went to see Hakon Rinpoche, and he told her how to very skillfully go to her room and beat up her pillow. So she would go back to her bedroom and she would let it and keep hitting it and beating it until whoever, she wasn't pretending. It wasn't like sticking pins in a doll. She wasn't pretending that the pillow was the person. She was just letting out the anger until it was gone. So through right conduct, we are committed not to hurt others with our body or with our speech, other human beings, animals, and so on. So there we do suppress, because suppressing it so that you can deal with it another way or later is better than creating the karma of hurting another being. But in the long term, what Buddha gives us is many methods whereby we can liberate our tendency towards being upset, being disturbed. And so the quicker we can learn to do that, better it is. And then some people say, yes, but if you're a Buddhist and you practice forbearance, are you just going to become a carpet that everybody walks over? Well, let's see at the end of our 5 weeks of teaching what you think about that one. It's your choice. Your choice. Kantaka, the king, the drunken king, and the long-term benefits where we're going. So I think that takes us to the essence of what this paramita is about. Really the essence. It's about you and your mind, your heart, and where are you taking it? And the idea is that we leave this life with a better mind, a better heart than we came into it with. That this life is a journey of progress. And in particular, that this propensity to be angry, to be upset, which could be a time bomb, an atom bomb, destroying our Dharma path in the future, that we are dealing with anger in this lifetime. For us, the important thing is no longer the other that upsets. This is our transformation. When we start, what can we talk about? Hypothetical ordinary people, or us before we practice the Dharma. Other upsets us. Other seems wrong, wrong in terms of our own mindset. Now we are going to change as quickly and as best we can, so that whatever happens in other doesn't matter too much. What matters is our own mind and how we react to it. There will always be other. This is the point. Look at Buddha. Buddha with 3 cosmic eons, millions, billions of years of a journey. Such beautiful karma. And in his very last life, having attained 10th bodhisattva level. Buddha was a bit more advanced than we are just now, in his last life. But even Buddha had in his life 2 assassination attempts. His cousin Devadatta, the reincarnation of that king, who not only split his community, split his sangha to take away He took away more than half the Sangha. He was a very powerful person, Devadatta. Calumny. People accused the Buddha of things he hadn't done. And so when we see even Buddha's life had other that was difficult. And we see it in the life stories of our great teachers. If we come to our present day, we look at the Tibetan masters we really venerate, His Holiness Dalai Lama, His Holiness Gampopa. Look at the things they've had to put up with in their life. So even though he's Dalai Lama, he had to see so much destroyed. He had to run for his life, flee Tibet, and he's had to deal with many things. So difficult other, please listen well, difficult other, upsetting other, unsatisfactory, disappointing other, frustrating other will always be there. Your Buddhist practice isn't going to get rid of it. It's going to be there again and again and again, life after life. It will take all sorts of shapes and forms. It can be other people, it can be circumstances, it can be wealth and poverty, it can be health, your own body, it can be companionship or lack of it, whatever. It's always going to be there. So our heart, our mind, and how we deal with that is important. We're not going to get rid of it, but what we can change 100% is how we relate to it. And that's what these teachings are for. They are incredibly, incredibly precious. They're not easy to apply. You need to apply them at the time. Just now talking about them, it's easy. When life gets disturbing, upsetting, whatever it is, troubles, takes away your peace, that's the time we need to apply them. And I remember Taisitupa saying, when he was talking about forbearance, he said, once I was really amazed. I was sitting at my window in the monastery, and outside I saw two monks I knew, and one of them had got very upset with the other, and he picked up a stick and he hit the other person. And he said, and the other person, instead of fighting or retaliating or blaming, just said, thank you. He said, I've read it in the books, but he said, I've rarely seen it in life. And he said, I was so amazed and so pleased to see that reaction. So this is the key point we are making with our bodhicitta training, a good heart. And when we do the bodhisattva prayer, we see, this heart, it is the bridge to carry you over all the troubled circumstances. It is the one medicine, the one elixir that cures so many illnesses. This is life as opposed to death in the world. All those beautiful things we say about bodhicitta. This bodhicitta mind, we are going to stay within it. Our beautiful place, our right place, our moral place, in a way that helps us progress on our own journey and that stops us from causing more harm and more karma. You see what happens when you're upset? Often we retaliate, we do things to other people, the environment around us. We create more karma that comes back as more of the same. This is the very nature of karma. You hit me, I hit you. And then, because I hit you, then you'll come back and hit me in another life through karma. And then I'll hit you again. It's the same with desire, with jealousy. These are repetitive patterns. We see them over this lifetime, but they happen over many, many lifetimes. So we're getting out of that. And however tempting it is to punch somebody on the nose, then we'd rather get out of the whole nose punching karma forever, even if that is, you have to swallow your pride or whatever. Do we become a carpet that other people walk on or not? I'll leave you to think about it. So now let's go back to the formal teachings. Must do some, at least in this general talk. So then if we go to Gampopa, we start with, as usual with the Paramita, we reflect on what's the problem if you don't have forbearance, and what are the benefits if you do. So it says, someone may have good qualities of generosity and right conduct, yet if he or she lacks forbearance, they're prone to being upset. Once the anger has arisen, and please remember anger means all those things, not just getting angry, depressed, resentful, frustrated, all of those. Then all the virtue created up to that time could be consumed. In a text called the Bodhisattva Collection, it says, this thing we call anger can overpower the roots of virtue established during 100,000 eons. The Shantideva's text, the Bodhisattva life. Whatever may have been excellently practiced, generosity, making offerings and so on, and built up over 1,000 ages, can, for all that, all be defeated by one burst of anger. It says, when anger has found a niche inside someone, it's like a festering wound of a poisoned arrow. A festering wound of a poisoned arrow. The mind knows no joy, no peace, and in the end, the person cannot even find rest in sleep. Gosh, I think I must be a very angry person. I know this so well. I look like I'm reading a story, my own story. The way your mind just keeps going back into the same story, again and again, turning it over, blaming. No, can't get out of it. And then, even at night time, if you wake up, then immediately the first place your mind goes to. I have quite a funny example for that, actually, is I've had blood pressure problems for about, 15 years. And so I had one of these wrist cuffs where you take your pressure. So, of course, you want to cheat a bit when you put it on. So you try and put it on and just sort of, be calm, Ken. And as soon as I tell myself, be calm, I think of sweet pastures, falling asleep on moss, butterfly, whatever it is, the first thing the mind goes to will always be, what's upsetting me? And then the pressure goes up. It's better to take it without thinking. Put the thing on and press the button straight away before you've got time to think, sometimes. So anyway, that's just me. But anyway, the mind that's upset. And it's the same with the other things that don't sound like anger. When you are sorry for yourself, we wouldn't normally call that anger. It's just self-pity, depression, sadness. It's the same thing. This is under this heading. It troubles our mind. We can't get out of it. We go back to it again and again. We can't sleep because of it. It says, in brief, once anger's got into your mind, then it's hard to find joy. And it says real anger in somebody who doesn't have forbearance will show on the outside as a violent demeanor. And through this, friends, relatives, employees all become fed up with you. And no matter what you do, even if you're generous towards them, you can't persuade them to put up with you any longer. When you come and turn up, they want to run away. There's furthermore, and this is so true of these days, my goodness me, in these days of the way media work to make people afraid, angry, upset, partisan. It's how media make their money. It says, those lacking forbearance lay themselves open to negative forces. So negative energies, negative forces, Mara, spirits, we just pray to them when our mind is taken over by those things we call anger. So today, Mara, negative forces are very powerful in our world, and when we let our mind get upset, then they can get into us. And then, this one's very important. It's from the Paramita teachings. When there is anger and no forbearance, how can there be enlightenment? Well, they can't. And I don't know how you think about enlightenment. We kind of think about it, it's there at the end of the path. We have this Dharma path, we travel, we do all the bits and pieces, we meditate, we study, and at the end there's enlightenment. The way it's presented in the teachings of the Paramita is not just what's at the end of the path. It's, you have the 6 paramita. When they're all perfect, you're enlightened whether you want to be enlightened or not. It's not that all of a sudden, I reached enlightenment. What does enlightenment mean? It means that your mind is perfectly generous. All the selfishness gone. It means that your mind is pure and ethical. There's no, as we saw last course, there's no twistedness, deviousness. Then that's perfect right conduct. When we have perfect forbearance and nothing can upset us anymore, and then perfect diligence, meditation, and wisdom, when all those areas, 6 areas, are complete, perfect, that's what we mean by Buddha. It's not some other state. And so the example they give a bit of a strange one, but never mind. It's a very vain king who wanted his portrait, he wanted himself painted, whole body. But he said that he realized some artists were very good at hands, other artists were very good at faces. So then he employs 6 artists and gives them piece of canvas each for that part of the body, and they have to paint. One does his hands, one does his face, and so on. And the idea is at the end, or however it was, then he'll have the very, very best picture. But in the meantime, one of the artists goes away to another country, so the picture's never complete. There's never the portrait of the king. So there can never be some experience, some realization, some state you attain, which it would be Buddhahood, enlightenment, unless forbearance is perfect. So that's, if we don't have forbearance, then that's what's wrong. What's right if we do have forbearance? And it says, there is no evil comparable to anger, and nothing so difficult as to be forbearing. Therefore, forbearance should be cultivated most earnestly, using all sorts of means. And what we'll see is we do get all sorts of means to help us. Beside this, by being forbearing, all sorts of happiness and well-being are found in everyday circumstances. This is so true. And often we're talking about enlightenment, it's a long-term goal, looking at a perfect mind. But in this life, even in a couple of years, you can find that what used to upset you doesn't anymore. And other people around you, people in your family, people around you, they still get upset by it. We don't get upset. And you can see the whole mechanism in somebody else. They can get really worked up. They can get angry. They can get so frustrated, so disappointed. Like politics. So we can be, as Buddhists, we can be good citizens. We can vote for the best we can find. It might not be that good, but the best we can find. We can participate. But then maybe before we used to get really upset by who got into power, who got out of power, what the people in power do, and so on. More and more we understand karma, cause and effect, the more we get a feel for what's going on. And although we try and change it for the better, we don't get upset anymore when we see what happens. In my age, I've been through so many generations. I think more or less every decade had its feel. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, they were different from the 60s, very different. In the 80s, Thatcher, I think Thatcher was the 80s in the UK. Anyway, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Every 10 years, you kind of feel the wave of group karma that's coming on. And who knows for the next decades, in the 2030s, the 2040s. It's there. So things that upset us before don't upset us. And then we see people around us still getting upset. And how pointless it is, and how weak their minds are, because they lose their minds. They lose their health because of it. The healthy mind affects the body. Unhealthy mind affects the body. They lose their mind because of what's happening in other. It's so sad. What's happening in other is, in the Chittamatra teaching, it's called Shamwang. It's under the power of something other. It's karma. What's happening to other out there is the huge power of karma, beyond our control. The only thing that's in our control is our own mind, our own heart. So letting other make us lose our mind, lose our heart, is so sad. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So it says, whoever through self-control manages to overcome anger will be happier in this life, not to mention future lives. And then, through forbearance, enlightenment will be attained. So then we come to that's the first part. What's wrong if we don't have forbearance? What's right if we do have it? And then the second from Gampopa is the definition, really. It's called in the text, it's called the essential character, the very essence. What is forbearance? It's to be unperturbed by anything. There's a quote from the text, the bodhisattva levels, which comes from Vasubandhu. It is not to be upset by anything whatsoever, by dwelling solely in compassion and having a mentality free of materialism. So there, in the support document, the next paragraph is what I explained earlier in the teachings about what we mean by disturbed. All the things that disturb the mind, yet under this general heading of anger. The Tibetan kuntra means worked up. It's like when you're cooking, you take something, you start beating it up, then get worked up. So we'll finish today by looking at the three main types of anger. First, forbearance as being unperturbed by harm inflicted by what is other than ourselves, other people, life circumstances. The second type is forbearance as coping with our own suffering of our body and our mind. So what's upsetting us isn't out there, it's our own body and health or what our own mind is doing, independently of other people, circumstances. And in particular, because if we think of a longer journey, not just this life, many lives on our Dharma path, coping with the suffering of practicing Dharma. So sometimes it's not easy to practice. And so we'll look into that. I think I might sneeze. No. Third type of forbearance is forbearance when aspiring to mind's unerring understanding of phenomena. So that's a very Buddhist phrase. Mind's unerring understanding of phenomena, the things. So we're talking about shunyata, voidness. So as we discover voidness and more and more, it becomes very challenging indeed. And sometimes we get to our limit. Very challenging because it challenges all of our mental constructs, the reality we've built for ourselves, which is also our survival mechanism. So we need to go wisely, intelligently, kindly, lovingly, caringly for ourselves. But there we will need forbearance, because as our world collapses, our ego's world is challenged and collapses, then that can be quite painful. So there's a very special aspect of forbearance that's in the future when we start the path, because we don't know very much about shunyata, voidness, emptiness, and so on. We're mainly focused on dealing with emotional upset. But of course, if we look at the path as a long journey for shunyata, then that will become more and more relevant. Then when we look at fast track enlightenment, and we look at the stories of Milarepa and Naropa, then Mapa as well. We see the hardships their gurus put them through, where their reality is challenged. So it says, of these, the first, so that's remaining unperturbed by other, means being forbearing through analyzing the nature of what's causing the trouble. We're coming back to that. We spend good time with this. The second is to be forbearing through analyzing the essential nature of suffering itself. Why do we suffer? What is suffering in ourselves? What's happening? By exploring that. And the third is a discerning analysis of the unerring nature of everything and anything. First two are cultivating forbearance in terms of our relative life. The third is to do with the ultimate truth of everything. So that's good. We'll stop there for today, I think. And then we go into the details next. I think next week we still have a session. And so next week we'll start looking at the details of the first type of forbearance. Anger or upsetness, disturbed mind caused by other. And some very, very useful, very kind of hands-on, applicable teachings, and lots of food for thought. So let's dedicate what was good in the formal part of this session. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. So thank you very much. We are launched. Have you anything you'd like to contribute or question you'd like to ask? Please.
Just a quick one, Ken.
Yes, James. Hi.
I was wondering about desire and desire's ability to disturb the mind, and how that fits in with these teachings. Do you have any comments at this stage about that? I can kind of see that forbearance is drilling into our attachments and aversions.
That's right. Yeah.
And I suppose anger is more easy to sort of chew on than desire.
Yeah.
But is it the same sort of thing? Because desire clearly disturbs the mind to some extent.
It is. When we look at the mind poisons more deeply, even though we make them 5, right? Desire, anger, jealousy, pride, ignorance or stupidity, we make 5. When you look at them, actually they are all rooted in desire. The reason we get upset, we get angry, because we don't get what we want. What's happening is not what we want, not what we desire. So it is taught as an official teaching that all of them are rooted in desire. In general, here we're looking at whatever upsets the mind, so it makes us disturbed, lose our serenity, but with a focus more on dangerous upset, let's say, right? Upset that could make people hurt other people very badly, could make people suicidal, could cause a lot of damage because suddenly things happen, you're out of control, that kind of thing. We're looking particularly at that. So at the heart of it will be desire, because what you want to be isn't. But when we look at the feeling of desire, it's, although it can flare up very quickly, of course, you can be suddenly very attracted, very drawn into circumstances, but the feeling of desire is more kind of long-term and smooth, whereas here we're looking at what is dangerous and can flare up. So it says desire is like, it's like water, it flows out to what you want to surround with your desire. So it says it's like water flows out and flows around something and encompasses it. It says desire is like water. What we're looking at here is said to be like fire. Like all of a sudden it can flare up and it's out of control before anyone can do anything. So we're looking particularly at that. But you can't, when you look into it, desire and anger, they're because of each other, or the anger's because of the desire.
And clinging must be in there as well somewhere.
Yeah, clinging is in there. It's like if somebody says insulting things to me, they say like, you're the most trash Dharma teacher I ever met, and on top of it, you've got an ugly nose, right? Okay, so then why would that make me upset? It's because I want to hear, you're a really good Dharma teacher, Ken. And I want to hear, wow, what a handsome person you are. So, it's because of the desire that you're going to get angry, or when life doesn't deliver what I desired, what I thought I deserved, and so on. I think whenever we look at it, why do we get upset at politics and politicians? In one way, it seems very normal, but when you look at it, I think why? It's because they're doing to people and to the country what I don't want, how I'd like it to be. There's always desire, I think.
That's good.
Yeah, but I think it's to do with this upsetting the mind. This is that, yeah, upset's a good word to help us understand.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken?
Yes.
I have
Susie. Yeah.
Hi, Ken. I have a question. Obviously, there's the gross and the subtle of all of these presentations, and obviously my health and everything that kind of goes on with my MS is quite a gross thing, and I find that easier to apply forbearance to. But something you said today really, really opened my mind, and I'm going to go away and I'm going to sit a lot in meditation, insight meditation, and reflect, because I've been taught as a psychotherapist, not to collude, don't collude. And but when I take that back to my personal life, my mum has an alcohol addiction, and as a child, in order to make sense of the world, I had to grow and learn not to collude. And this week, two interesting things happened, and I have to really look at what my motivation was. It may just have been thoughtless speech, or it may have been a flash of anger, very, very quick. So I was in a situation last weekend where I was at a festival. I was working, I've got another role as a journalist, and my mum had wanted access to more alcohol. Now she's broken her elbow. So obviously I wanted to take care of her and said no, because it was in my car. And so we managed to get back to the car because she decided she needed, you know, I knew it was about the alcohol, but I was completely in control of the situation. And I said, you can walk to the car with me, but only I will be getting in the car. She managed to slide herself in the car, and I slid her alcohol completely out the way so she couldn't find it. She was trying every way you can imagine to find that alcohol. You can see the humorous side of it, but it, you know, for her it was quite a sad thing. She got annoyed at me, and she did this thing where she went, well, I'm not getting out your car until you give me the alcohol. And I said, well, you've brought me up and taught me how to say, well, I'm not doing anything unless you get out my car. And so I could feel myself getting quite angered. And I thought, no, I can remember she told me, no matter what, be kind. So I said, okay, Mum, you sit in the car. That's okay. I'll just listen to the music. And I distracted myself. And so that was fine. Eventually, she said, okay, let's go back to the festival. So, you know, it worked. And she kind of smiled because she knew that it was a reflection of what she had taught me. And I felt that I hadn't been colluding. I didn't attribute to any harm because, you know, I was mindful of her general health with her alcohol addiction and with her elbow. And I thought, okay, that worked out okay. But where my problem came was this week. We were walking in the garden centre with my nana, and we were going to visit my aunt, and it just seems really, it's really, 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 really subtle. And my nana, we were all wanting to pay for lunch, and my nana stood aside and she said, well, if you don't let me pay for lunch, I am not going in. And out of my mouth came, oh, that's where you learned it, Mum. So that's why you sat in my car and said, because I wouldn't give you the alcohol, that you wouldn't leave my car. I said, now I know where we all learn it from. Well, my mum got upset, and I could tell that it hurt her heart. And now part of that is the collusion, because I didn't play the game of let's pretend Mum doesn't have an alcohol addiction. But also it did, no matter what, no matter the reason, it did hurt her. And so I'm now sitting with, was that careless speech? Or was that a flash of my anger that I was holding in when we were in that situation with the car? And I have to work that out. Either way, I think it was a mistake. And perhaps I need to learn about what collusion means in the relative world and in that sort of bodhisattva terms. What does that mean on that level, if that makes sense? Is it something different? Because today I heard, actually, sometimes saying nothing is probably smarter. And it isn't necessarily colluding, but it's about not harming others or yourself from whatever that state of mind is, and the practice of forbearance. Am I correct in picking that up?
Yeah. There's no thick book with all the circumstances in it that's got all the answers. So then the only answer that a teacher can give is very inadequate, but very true, which is you have to do your best. That each of us, when we come to these so real situations, so complicated and difficult enough if the other person has similar values to yourself, like they're Buddhist too, right? But if they're in a world which doesn't have your values, doesn't have your vision about what all this is about and ethics and where you're going and bodhicitta and all the rest, then what's the wisest thing to do? Actually, only we can know. Sometimes we do go and talk with the teacher, but then unless they're familiar with, like in this case, your mother, your family, all the circumstances, and you've got time to really talk around it and discuss it, often lamas can't help. And they tell me, you know, say people, the Rinpoches and lamas, so many times, they say people come, they think you know everything. They think somehow you tune in and they say, I don't know what goes on in their family, and you don't know the karma of this person and that person. And so you do your best, but people kind of expect magic from the Rinpoches. And actually, this is the real Dharma path we learn from. We have to do our best. If we get it right, we learn from that. If we didn't quite get it right, we got it wrong. We learn from the mistakes. This is real learning to be a bodhisattva. And it's why the Bodhis, you know, have all these 10 bodhisattva levels that can take so many lives. Because it's only in the real field of experience. It's why I included that thing from Narcissus and Goldmund. He's out there actually feeling something, experiencing something, not listening to ideas in a monastery. You know, it's the only way we learn sometimes. But then the teacher can only say, you know, you really apply all you know about being kind and compassionate, but also you want to be wise and not just kind in the moment, sort of what seems like temporary kindness, but in the long term, perhaps you can help by the things you say, which maybe they're not unkind, but maybe they help somebody see themselves better. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes not. And who's going to know but you? And even then we can't know until we try. And sometimes it's real disaster, and then we learn from it. I think it's the only way. But I think you're doing exactly the right thing, what you said at the beginning. I need to go away and sit and think about this. That's it. That's it. And by the way, do you want this left in the recording, Stacey, or taken out?
I don't mind, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Yale's asking a question on the chat because mic isn't working or something.
All right, let me see.
Do you want me to read it out for her?
Yes, please.
It says, my question is, how we cannot be upset when in from our eyes a crime or an abuse is happening and not doing anything to stop it is very unkind. Even if I need to stop the criminal or abuser by physical means, example, the story of the Buddha as a captain, also the generosity paramita requires us to protect others. So these are kinds of contradictions for me.
I don't think they need to be, because you can do something. You don't need to be upset. It's not that it's only through being upset that you can intervene. You know, like you say, through all of our various commitments, whether it be to generosity, saving life, protecting life, whether it be to stopping a crime, we can intervene, but we intervene through compassion. We intervene as calmly as we can. Being upset just makes you more confused. So of course you can't just turn a switch today and say, oh, okay, I've understood the Buddha's teaching, now I'm going to turn a switch. I won't be upset anymore, I'm just going to be perfectly compassionate. Well, first of all, we don't have perfect compassion yet, we're working on it. But we certainly know where we're going, and we see the really it's the stupidity of being upset, and that people tell themselves this: if I don't get upset, I can't stop an injustice. Of course you can stop an injustice. There are so many things we can do. And it really, once one's got that idea in, that there is no need to be upset or angry about injustice, then it opens the doors to wonderful reflections. I have some friends who work in conflict resolution, and it's just amazing how, at first a situation, is this one right or is that one right? You find a third way, a fourth way, a way to come together. You start to see the situation from new angles, and especially yourself. So being upset does not mean that we don't intervene, that we don't do things. What we do should be guided by the Buddha's teaching of kindness, generosity, protecting, saving life. And there is, like in the answer to Stacey's question, if it's very circumstance specific, only you can know the people you're dealing with. And what might help short term, long term. I don't know, Yael, if that's helpful or not, but it's certainly, even if people don't agree with this, I hope it's food for thought, that you really look into this thing, because people feel this way. It feels like the Buddhist thing is to avoid, just to pull back, because we don't want to know.
And it's interesting what you answer, because Rinko Tukul actually answered this question as well a couple of weeks ago, like you were saying. And he was reasoning with us and saying, well, have a look at it. Anger, the klesha anger is really short, and you lose your power of reasoning, and you get tired quickly because it's not a sustainable energy. Whereas, like what you were saying, to have a clear mind with well-considered responses, that fuels sustainable energy so you can get more done.
Absolutely.
And he also said about repression, repression is, he was suggesting that in the West, we've misunderstood what repression is within the therapy world in particular. And he was saying that repression means that you hold on to anger. Rather than transforming it. And I found that very helpful.
Yeah, the idea is, in Mahayana, is transformation. In the Shravaka level of teaching, we do avoid situations. It's a question of getting out. You avoid people, you avoid conflict situations. You just want to take your mind to peace. In the Mahayana, it says it's like transforming anger. So we welcome the circumstances so that we have the fuel to transform and become strong. And then in Vajrayana, we have a third approach, which is different again, let's say.
I think there's a key message here, Ken, that it's possible not to be angry.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd suggest humbly that maybe to begin with, one doesn't realize that. One assumes one has to get angry at certain situations. But I think hearing the stories and seeing the experiences of people who don't get angry, who demonstrate forbearance, I think that's quite an insightful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've met, I suppose they were mainly Buddhist teachers. It's just not in them. It's just not there.
I have a silly analogy, which is working in the emergency services on the ambulance. Obviously, you are faced with gory, gruesome, difficult, unusual situations that many people would have an emotional or have a kind of reaction to. But for us, we have to hold it together. We have to be able to cope, to be able to act. So there's a sort of corollary there.
Yeah, very good.
How one responds to a certain situation in front of us. And if you get emotional or upset or angry or any negative emotion, you won't be able to do anything. You won't be able to be useful.
Yeah.
But if you are, you can see.
Yeah, I agree, James. I was thinking of a kind of parallel with first aid. I do first aid in the school, and we'll get lots of things happening. And it's that thing of the first thing you do is check for safety and the rest of it, so that you go into it with a clearer state of mind. So, and I think that with anger, there's a social expectation that you should be angry about certain things to be part of the tribe. And if you're not, then there's something wrong with you. And that creates so many problems. I mean, I'm thinking back to even big political situations. It's the same. There's a whole narrative brought up in media and by politicians of you should be angry. We should do this. Otherwise, otherwise we can't do anything. And it's just so untrue. It just means we take really harmful actions instead, as we see in the world. So it's about so not being angry is not about therefore giving up and not acting. It's about acting wisely and actually more effectively for the longer term, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
No, thank you. That was you said it. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you all very much, and wish you, what date are we? 24th. Just want to check the calendar. No, so our next session is in 2 weeks' time, isn't it? Yeah, 2 weeks' time. So we come back to forbearance in 2 weeks' time. Next weekend, it's our monthly Tonglen group. So I hope you've got a lot to think about between now and then. Take good care. See you soon.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Ken.
very much,
Vivian.
Ken.
Bye.
Thank you.